Chapter 15. Home at last. Though it was spring, the journey home was a cold and hungry one. For 2 weeks, the little party traveled, much of the time in the rain. They stopped at the Buchanan Ranch one rainy night. Miss Sally got stiffly down from her horse, and her daughter-in-law, Miss Laree, came on the run. At first, she did not recognize the two robe bundles, one on Miss Sally's saddle and other on Giles. The little fellows were sound asleep. Willie was asleep in Mr. Johnny's arms. Mr. Johnny had petted and cuddled him the whole trip. "I kind of feel a kinship to this little feller," he said. "He's a little poor orphan like I was." When Miss Laree discovered the content of the bundles, and the little boys came pushing out of the robes, she snatched one of them while her husband Buck took the other. Dad's eyes filled with tears at the joyful reunion. For all the Buchanans knew, the three of them had been dead for almost 2 years. Miss Laree was hysterical. "Oh, Ma," she cried, throwing her arms around her mother-in-law. "You saved them! You saved our babies!" Mr. Buck chuckled dryly. "Might have known it would take more than a passel of wild Comanches to get past our Ma," he said. Miss Sally grinned impishly. "I didn't recognize you put that much faith in your Ma, son." As they rode into the home place the next evening, the house and barns held in the cold rain had never looked so good to Thad. The riders struck spurs to their tired horses as they rode down the lane. The horses were glad to be at home too, and needed no urging. They splashed through the mud, and the men waving their hats and giving forth the wild Comanche yells. They were sure that would bring the family running, and it did. Pa, Ma, Travis, Dulcie, and little Stevie came hurrying from the house as the travelers rode up to the kitchen door. Dad was afraid his mother would faint when she first saw him. No one had told her that Giles and Mr. Johnny had gone to the territory to look for him. "Why didn't you tell me where you were going?" she demanded of Giles after she had come close to cracking Thad's ribs with her hugging. "We figured that you and Pa had enough disappointments already, and we didn't know if we would find him," Giles explained. They told the family all they knew of Miss Sally and the twins, and the rumors of a white girl in Willibur's Tonkawa village. They also presented the little blonde boy, Willie. Pa said, "Well, now at least we've heard something more promising than anything before." Ma said, "Dulcie and I will take care of Willie until we can find his sister." "This young one is my own personal affair," Mr. Johnny said. "If you'll take him over till I can locate his sister, I'll see that he gets home to her." "When are we going to try to find the Willibur's village?" Thad asked impatiently. He knew the Tonkawas were enemy to the Comanches and usually friendly to the white people. Maybe it was some other white girl the Tonkawas found, Thad suggested. He could hardly let himself hope that he could have found a trace of Melissa. "Not much chance there'd be any other white girl riding alone across the West Texas on a black pony," Giles responded. "I have a feeling we're getting a lead on Melissa's whereabouts." "Why doesn't somebody do something about it then?" Thad demanded. He was of a mind to get on the horse and start out in the rain. "Don't worry, son. We sent word to Wiley Branson as soon as you told us about the Tonkawa scouts. He'll be here and be with him as soon as they can make it." Thad had to be satisfied with that. Wiley Branson had built a small cabin alongside the Conway's house, where Aunt Dulcie and little Stevie could stay until he could get his family together again. He and Bew stayed there too when they were not out searching for Melissa. At that time, they were away looking for her, following up another rumor. Stevie was fat and healthy and as happy as a little boy could be. Aunt Dulcie had to hear all about Melissa. She wanted to know how the Comanches dressed her, how they treated her, and most of all, how she had got away from them. Tears ran down her cheeks as Thad talked. "Oh, my baby," she wailed. "When they gonna find my Lizzie? We're done lost, Miss Marcella and little Silly. When they gonna bring back my Lizzie?" Willie Branson and Bew arrived a day or so later and were quite excited to hear the Tonkawa story. They set out on the next day, hoping to find the Tonkawa camp. From the first time, Thad missed the affectionate nicker a little bit. Never since he had first got her had she failed to welcome him, except when she had been away with the Comanches. Aside from that, Thad's first morning he had spent had seemed near heaven as he could ever hope to be on this earth. He had slept all night in his own warm feather bed. He had awakened to the smell of breakfast cooking, eggs frying and Ma's feather-light biscuits browning in the oven. He put on the clean clothes Ma had laid out for him to wear, some of Travis's old ones. His own clothes would be far too small. He hurried to the kitchen, where Ma had the breakfast almost ready. Ma sent him to the well to bring in cold milk, as she always had. It was a delight for him to watch his mother that morning, and to sniff the odors of home. It was pure joy to eat the good victuals she cooked. After Pa and Travis had brought in foaming buckets of milk, and Ma had strained it. For days, Thad took pleasure in the life at home. Like any boy, he had not appreciated it as much before. If his long months with the Comanches had accomplished nothing else, they had helped him love his home more. Ma looked lovingly at Thad for a while. Then she said, "It was worth it, honey. I'm glad we made you do it." "What was worth it, Ma? What did you make me do?" "Honey, you used to buck like a bay steer at having to learn all those scripture texts. You know you did, but you'll have to admit that they brought you home to us." Thad knew what she meant and felt the same way about it. Besides, the Bible text had helped him obey patiently instead of fighting against the Indians. If he had resisted them, things might have turned out far different. They had helped him in another way, too. Never again would he feel hatred for another person. Now he hated only the Indians' evil actions, and he regarded those actions as a result of wrong thinking. He had learned to love some individuals among them. For the same reason they loved certain white folks, he wished only good for them all. Then he thought of Melissa. "We'll find Melissa too," he said. "I've been sure of that ever since our prayers have been answered by your homecoming," Ma agreed. Thad sat thinking for some time. "I got to where I sort of loved Little Rabbit like you," he said. "I remember listening to Mr. Laugh Allen arguing with Preacher Heston. He claimed that he could never love a Comanche, and I felt the same way. Of course, even though I loved Little Rabbit sort of the same way I love you. Especially after I was sick and she took such good care of me. I never loved her so much. And I love Scarpony sort of like I love Travis. In her own way, Little Rabbit is a good woman, no doubt," Ma said. "I'd like to get to know her." I had just about come to the place where I would love Yellow Cloud too. Then I saw the cameo. "Cameo?" Ma asked. "He had a cameo?" Thad nodded. It was a brooch pin. It had the letter M worked into the rim in the gold part. He wore it around his neck when he put on his war clothes along with a lot of other stuff. Beads, bear claws, a gold watch, and such things. I got a good look at it when he was putting it on. He hung the pin in a rawhide thong. It was Miss Marcella Branson's pin. Ma caught a quick breath. "Oh, son," was all she said. Wiley and View Branson rode in after a week or so. Thad knew, as soon as he saw them getting off their horses at the lot, that they had not found Melissa. They had simply not been able to locate Willowbird's village. The Tonkawas had apparently been on the move for the past few months, and no one knew where to look for them. They planned to start again in a few days, when early one morning 2 riders came to the Conway ranch. Thad was out at the lot stacking hay when they rode in. He recognized one of them as Miss Sally's son, Buck, the father of the twins. He was anxious to know why they had come. "Your pa around?" Buck asked. Mr. Conway came from the barn just then. "Here I am," he said. "We're looking for Wiley Branson," Buck said. "He's in our house right now," Mr. Conway told him. "Have you got good news for him?" "We think so," Buck replied. They hurried to the house, Thad following them. He was all trembled to hear what the men had to say. Somehow, he felt as though the news would be good this time. Wiley Branson must have felt the same way. He was more excited than anyone had seen him before. "Don't send me on another one of those wild goose chases," he begged them. "What's your news?" "I don't believe this is a wild goose chase, Mr. Branson," Buck said. "We went to Fort Conco day before yesterday. They told us that a couple of Tonkawas from Willowbird's village had visited the fort. The Indians said their chief had heard that the Long Knives were searching for a white girl. They had come to lead the Rangers to Willowbird's village. Captain Howard had sent 2 of his men with the Tonkawas to bring the girl to the fort. If they succeeded, all you need to do is go to Fort Conco." "I'll be ready to ride in 20 minutes, Wiley Branson said. "Come on, Bew, get your things together." "I'm going too." Thad could scarcely recognize his own voice. He ran to saddle up Get Along, a buckskin he had been riding in place of Little Bit. Mother Conway went to the kitchen to get some rations for the journey. Father Conway's voice was quieter and steadier than Thad's. "I'll go with you too, Wiley," he said. "Continue listening."